Hi, everybody. Welcome to this special report of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm PCMTV Founder Jimmy Young on location at the National Stakeholder Summit here in Washington, D.C. The NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association, is running this summit, and one of the panelists happens to be somebody that I actually interviewed a few years back. His name is John Kagia. He is from the New York office of Cannabis Management still. Now, when I interviewed you, I loved your title, Chief Information Officer. Tell me the company, because I can't remember what the company...
The company was New Frontier Data, and he's the Chief Knowledge Officer, yes.
And I learned so much from that interview, so I want to just throw that in as a compliment. You're in New York. New York right now is under a microscope and has been really since the beginning. Has that market settled down? Are people now, is there less illegal operations going on that were there before, rather than getting into all of them? But has that helped? And are you starting to see more growth in the actual state itself, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. New York is in a completely different place than we were even 12 months ago. We've issued over 1,700 licenses at this point. We have over 370 dispensaries now open. Since sales began, we've done over $1.5 billion in sales. We did an enforcement push which saw over 1,500 illicit storefronts closed. And for the legal businesses that were operating close to these illicit dispensaries, we saw, in many cases, their revenues double once we padlocked those illicit stores. We are in a completely different ecosystem than we are. And I would argue that we're in a place where New York is really starting to show that it is the most exciting, most dynamic, and most opportunity-rich market in the country.
And when you look at California, which is still the largest revenue producer in this particular industry, they continue to screw up their state. How is New York going to make sure that they don't screw up with a mature market after a few more years? Because California still can't get it right.
Look, regulating cannabis is a difficult business, and if this was an easy thing, everybody'd be doing it. Part of what we're trying to be very intentional about in New York is, one, learning from the experiences of others. We have seen supply chain imbalances create acute downward pressure on prices and lead to a lot of cultivators not being able to operate. We've seen market imbalances lead to a huge amount of either diversion or inversion. And so you need to think about how well balanced your supply chain is. We've seen how limited enforcement has led to the explosion of the unregulated market, and that's why we're being so intentional now about devoting resources to enforcement. It really is critical that we pay very close attention to the history of the markets that have been doing this for a long time as we're building our market, but also critical that we also build a market that reflects the priorities, the ethos, and the values of New Yorkers. And so two of the things that have been really important in New York, one has been about ensuring that social equity participants not only get a seat at the table, but are able to stay in the game over the medium term. I think we've built a market that enables that. And two, more broadly, that this is an ecosystem that is sustained by small and medium-sized businesses, and that we're not handing this market solely to the world's largest cannabis companies. I think our licensing structure, our regulatory model, and the governing law should ensure that we're able to achieve that as New York grows into a mature market.
There's a new infant market coming on board with Minnesota starting to give out their first licenses. In your experience and knowledge, what would be a good piece of advice for the Minnesota folks?
Communicate a lot, over-communicate if you must, so that expectations aligned between lawmakers, your regulator, and the public who are going to be participating in this market. Two, ramp up enforcement early and make it clear that unlicensed illicit operations will not be tolerated in the state. You really need to disincentivize the growth of the unregulated market early. Three, manage your quality control very, very tightly. I think consumers who are very well versed, most consumers are transitioning from the unregulated market to the legal market. Legalization isn't about creating new customers. It's about ensuring that consumers who already use cannabis are having access to these safer legal products out of the regulated market. And so ensuring that you have that quality that can bring the consumers out of the unregulated market into the legal market, I think is also a key priority.
Got to ask about the industrial hemp, the hot hemp that has been developed because the FDA sat on their hands for 7 years and did nothing. And leaving that up to human behavior, humans find ways to cut corners and figure out a way to get high from hemp at 0.3%. Will we ever see a single regulatory body to oversee this plant on every percentage of THC possible?
So I think every single state is watching this issue very, very closely. And I think this is actually part of the reason for lobby days like NCIA is having this week in Washington, D.C. What I'd say is this: having two essentially identical products regulated by two entirely different regulatory schemes, to me, seems unsustainable. And so what most states are looking for is some guidance, one, on what the federal intent was for the cannabinoid hemp ecosystem, and two, whether the federal government is going to provide any guidance or structures, minimum standards for those products can be, and how they'll be manufactured, how they'll be tested, and how they can be distributed. This adds a significant layer of complexity to the regulated cannabinoid economy. And we don't know quite yet how this is going to play out. New York, I will say, was very intentional to focus specifically on the public health factors. So we did not ban, higher potency cannabinoid hemp products. We just said, if you're going to be buying those products, you can only sell them in channels which are age gated. But we do permit products that are up to 1% THC from cannabinoid hemp to be sold through less strictly regulated channels. We did that because we're really concerned about particularly young adults, minors walking to stores and buying these products, thinking because they're finding them in the bodegas, in the grocery stores, that they're safe. When, we know that if it was the adult use equivalent product, we would want it to be strictly regulated. But this is a multi-billion-dollar question that every single state is paying very close attention to. And we're certainly kind of looking very keenly at the federal government for some direction.
Yeah, federal government getting direction. Are you sure we're in the right country for that these days? Because I don't know if there's any direction at all going on, but that's just a personal thing. John, always a pleasure to talk with you and meet you, sir. You're a great addition to this industry and to the fight for acceptance and getting rid of this cannabis prohibition once and for all. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Jimmy.
All right, that's John. I'm Jimmy. We're going to take a break. And remember, this Cannabis Coast to Coast special report will continue from the NCIA's Lobby Days after this.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
We focus solely on the cannabis space. The cannabis is not just another item that we've put on our website and said, oh, we're in cannabis. We do cannabis and cannabis only, and we focus on cannabis day in and day out. So with Buds Group, we're going to not only work with you and give you advice, we're going to help see your project through to completion. And you're going to find at the end of the day, it'll be a fraction of a cost of working with a larger firm, because our executives are focused just on cannabis and we run lean.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this very special edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News on location at the NCIA's Lobby Days here in Washington, D.C. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of PCMTV and the executive producer of the news show. And I walk into this place where they're having their reception, and I run into a guy that I've known. Charlie, I've known you, I think, for 5 years now.
It's been a minute.
When did the book come out?
The book came out in, I think...
2019?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, because that's when it was.
The big news, by the way.
Tell me the big news, because I know what I kind of have an idea where you're going.
They've commissioned a second edition.
For you.
Yeah, so I'm writing a second edition right now. It's due, manuscript is due in October, so I should probably get started.
Yeah, you should.
I have.
You got all summer to go, though.
But the challenge is, of course, you finish it by October and then it gets published the following year, right? Like the law's moving so quickly,
Or not moving at all.
Right, that's true. The hemp law is moving quickly.
Right, is that what, are we focused on that?
Well, in the book does cover hemp heavily because I think that's been the biggest change really since 2019. I mean, 2019, I was reading the first edition because, it talks a lot about CBD.
Yep.
Do you remember the CBD days? That was the first kind of like bubble after you had 2018 Farm Bill.
And I still can't believe that the FDA's had 7 years to actually come up with regulations and hasn't done a bloody thing, Charlie.
Well, they're too busy convincing people not to take vaccines.
That kind of did throw off a lot of movement, and nobody even remembers the years and everything.
But yeah, no, if you read the first edition, which is a collector's item now, a lot of it's about CBD, but the CBD stuff sort of went away. And because I think at the end of the day, consumers want to feel something, and the CBD is very subtle.
Yep.
But Delta 8, Delta 10 is a lot less subtle.
Charlie, are you surprised that human behavior figure out a way to get high from hemp?
No, I guess not. I mean, it's who is a stand-up? Doesn't Chris Rock have a stand-up about that? It's about like you ban everything. People be in their basements like extracting stuff from like tree leaves. People just want to get high.
People just want to escape their reality and have a little chill out session, or just kind of, I need to relax. And
Altered states.
Altered States of Consciousness was a course at Tufts University when I was a freshman. Okay. I just want you to know. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
You taught it.
Oh God, the professor. It's sad. He was a psychology professor, and if I, cover a little bit, I might be able to come up with his name. I doubt it though. But there was a fire in North Hall that burnt his research, and also the hide of Jumbo the elephant that was the mascot of Tufts University. I know these things.
A real elephant?
P.T. Barnum donated the elephant to Tufts to be their mascot in 1856. I know all this stuff. I never thought in a million years this would come up. But yes, that's and as a kid, when my dad used to bring me to his alma mater, I used to love to go see Jumbo. And now, of course, the only thing left is a tusk. But there's also...
You go to the Museum of Natural History here, there's a big elephant.
Yes, there is, but it's not Jumbo. And Jumbo is in bronze now, outside North Hall, that has been rebuilt. But there was a horrible 10-alarm fire on Tufts in 1970. I want to say it was 74, the spring of 74, which was the year my brother Mark graduated. We are 3 generation. But let's go back to why we're here, what we're trying to do. This is such a strange time to be in Washington, D.C., just because the line in between the two parties has gotten wider.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that will stall any kind of reform movement, because if the Democrats say something, the Republicans are going to say no. And if the Republicans say something, the Democrats are going to say no, because they don't ever want to agree with each other. Is there a way to have cannabis being an issue that touches so many parts of our lives? Could it bring with Republican government a regulatory body and a reform movement? Can the States Act get passed, Charlie? That's a lot of questions.
I had 5 meetings today, 3 of which with Republicans, member of the House, 2 of which with Democrat members of the House. All 5 meetings were positive, including all 3 Republican meetings. I really think that if, the Republicans they're generally in favor of state rights, and I think the Republicans also are aware, once they've been educated, that the stuff that the constituents are complaining about, these smoke and vape stores that are popping up everywhere, selling sort of unregulated, intoxicating hemp.
Right.
And I think that that blame sort of falls on the broader industry, when the real issue is that you need to have responsible regulation for the hemp side of the industry as well. So, I guess I would say, listen, I met with the, legislative assistant of a very, very conservative Republican. And when I was leaving, there were very positive meeting. He was like, did you bring me goodies?
And wait a second. You mean something to put in my pocket? Is that what they were actually asking you for?
I think he was, a little psychedelics, man.
Oh, goodness gracious.
That's another, but by the way, the other one that I think that there's bipartisan support on is on psychedelics as well.
And
I think that's probably easier to push across.
We were just talking about this. I know. And I have a personal issue as a media person adding another plant medicine to the argument. See, it feeds the prohibitionists. They're going to say, oh, first you wanted me to legalize cannabis, now you want me to legalize a psychedelic? It's a gateway drug again. I don't need to hear that from them again. I really don't.
I think that the thing is the military guys are really in favor of psychedelics.
And God love them. They should have access to whatever they need to overcome what they come back from. I know plenty of veterans like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, getting distracted from cannabis, but it does seem to me like any Republican elected official is 1 or 2 meetings with a vet away from being pro psychedelics. Because you talk to one of these guys who were like, came back, and I was screaming at night, I couldn't sleep, all this horrible stuff, and I went through this, I had an Ibogaine experience or a psilocybin experience, and like now I'm living my life again. It's it's hard to argue with that. I mean, it's like,
well, it's also hard to argue for them to actually give away medical cannabis to fight PTSD, even though the anecdotal evidence is overwhelming for that, and they'll be happy to throw opioids at you. That's what the biggest issue is. Again,
yeah, no. So it seems like the states' rights argument, I think, really resounds with Republicans, and that's why I think that I think the problem is, here's my read at least, is that one, nobody wants to be first out of the pack, right? So you do get a lot of questions like, where's leadership on this, right? So I do think that things sort of like, I think if you got a little action from leadership, I think you could see these guys, because it is philosophically consistent with, American conservative, which is like, let the states, right?
100%. Hence the name of that act that's sponsored by Joyce and Titus.
So I think that there's, again, you're going with a really hostile environment right now in DC, but.
Oh, you mean the impeachment vote that is just going to be, kind of laughed at, but they want to go through it just for the sake of going through it? I have no idea. I don't get how politicians think. I'm not going to try either.
I think the other argument that I think resonates with people is, listen, at the end of the day, you could have 280E, and 280E is not going to get rid of cannabis use. All it's going to do is punish the state legal businesses that are following the law and push the market underground, right? You can see this in places like California, right? You're jacking up the state tax in California. What's that going to do? Is that going to shift the market towards more illegality, right? It's already 80% illegal,
right?
It's going to shift it towards more legality, right? So it's like, if you want states' rights and if you want law and order, to me these things are no brainers.
Yeah.
I understand that it's not a in a world where there's war and death and global, all the serious stuff. I understand that cannabis may not be able to,
right.
But unlike these protracted issues, right? Like, it's actually pretty simple to maybe not fix cannabis policy, but you could pass 2 or 3 simple bills, and the cannabis policy in this country would be 200% better.
Yeah, and maybe that is the low-hanging fruit that was talked about years ago when they were talking about safe banking, and they still haven't even gotten that across the finish line or even the starting line in the Senate.
It hasn't been introduced yet this year.
Right, on either. Yeah.
States has been introduced, but not.
Yep. This is my first experience actually hanging out with lobbyists and seeing what they do and how they do it. And of course, I found it fascinating. But I also recognize now why the government's very good at delaying tactics. They don't like to make decisions for some reason, Charlie. And is it because they're afraid that they'll make the wrong decision and it'll cost the country? Or is it litigious? Is it the lawsuits that come up whenever a new law is passed? I don't know. It's in other words what I told you years ago. The best investment would be in a law firm, because you guys get to argue on either side at this point. That being said, how are we ever going to get to the point where we can find middle ground between these two warring parties?
Right. I mean, which is a bigger issue than just cannabis.
Oh my God, totally.
But
cannabis can bring them together. This is the problem. They don't understand that's the concept here.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, I don't know how to fix our political system.
Yeah.
I do think that a good step in the right direction would be passing Safe Banking, States Act 2.0.
Right.
I think those are those.
So here's my theory.
Yeah.
I've said this before on camera, and I'll say it again. Ego drives this president more than anything else. His desire to go down in history as the greatest president of all time. Okay? And I say, you know what? If the guy ends 2 wars, cuts the government in half, changes the education system, and regulates cannabis, the plant, on both sides, it's going to be tough for me not to respect that. That's quite a resume if he gets all that done. I don't know if he can, but ego can drive him towards making a little call to the Republican Party, Mr. Johnson maybe at the House or whatever, and say, can we get this going, please? We need to get this done. That's leadership, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if I was talking to President Trump, I would say it's a great opportunity to show you're able to do something that Biden was never able to do.
Right.
And I don't think, and I mean, I'm not an administrative law expert by any stretch, but they've already had a rulemaking process. They got, 40,000 comments for rescheduling the Schedule 3. So I think you've got enough information. I think you just do an interim final rule.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, by the way.
You know, again, I'm not the expert there. I mean, I've heard arguments on both sides of it. But there's certainly people that say you don't need to have this administrative law hearing. You could just issue an interim final rule that says it's Schedule 3. It's probably going to be litigated. But you know what? If you look at that HHS report, it's going to be a tough argument to say that it belongs in Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 if you're just looking at the scientific evidence.
You know what? I'm all for bringing it to Schedule 3 if they rewrite the Controlled Substances Act, because they know more now about the dangers of fentanyl, the dangers of opioids, the dangers of LSD and heroin. They know more about that now than they did when that act was put into place by a man who continues to haunt me to this day, because he haunted me when I was 12 years old, and I protested against the Vietnam War. I'm talking about Richard Nixon. And I just think it's time. I don't know. And if it's ego, and if it's because Biden couldn't get it done, I got it done, if that's what's going to drive it, I'm okay with that. I really am. Here's what my biggest concern with that is. Will the Democrats step in the way and say, what about social justice? Can we get everybody out of jail for this plant? Because I'm afraid that might happen.
Well, I think listen, I mean,
and I want social justice, don't get me wrong.
Listen, I was going to say, you could also, I'd also say this, I was like, listen, you don't need a bill for that. The president can use his presidential pardon power at a federal level.
And he has.
He can pardon all these. He could pardon more people, right?
Oh, no. I know one in particular. I don't know if you know the story of Corvain Cooper from 40 Tons, but he was actually sentenced to life in prison.
And Trump pardoned him?
The last day of his first term, he pardoned him. And he got busted for having 40 tons of cannabis, which is a ridiculous amount. Let's just say, that being said, he got that life sentence, and Trump pardoned. And I met the guy. I talked to him both on the record and off the record. And of course, he's going to say, what, do you think I'm going to knock the guy that got me out of jail? I'm like, no, I don't expect you to do that at all. In fact, I'd like you to share your story with as many people as possible, just to show that this guy actually has a heart and understands that there's been injustice in this country.
No, I mean, and listen, we've had this conversation, if you look at the statements that President Trump has made with respect to rescheduling and state legalization.
In Florida, he used it to his own benefit. Let's cut to the chase, but go ahead. Yep.
Well, listen.
It's a politician. You got to do everything you can.
I guess he said more positive things on the record than any other Republican president. He said things on the record
right.
more positive than most any Democratic president.
I live to hear the day, but yes.
So,
yeah.
We just need, some action. And I think that you could, listen, I think he could do it today.
Right.
I mean, you could do a lot of things today. You could potentially do the interim final rule. You could also issue like a new Cole memo.
Mm-hmm.
You could also issue a new Cole memo on psychedelics as well.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great. There's a lot of things you can do outside of the legislative process, but I also think that, it wouldn't be the worst thing for Congress to try and work together on a bipartisan basis. I mean,
isn't that what a novel idea?
I mean, it's I guess my whole theory is I think a lot of the dissension is downstream of technological change and social media, which just seems to sort of breed this kind of hostility, because that's what gets attention online is conflict.
Well, the same people that voted in the Farm Bill gave the keys to the asylum to those social media companies to ask them to self-police themselves. And they hide behind those community guidelines. And I'm sure you know that they take advantage. They shut down cannabis companies on a regular basis.
Yeah,
they shadow ban them.
We have like one of my partners, Brandon Kurtzman, has like a little cottage industry of helping people reinstate their Meta pages.
Oh, on Facebook, yeah. Yeah.
So we've been able to help people on Facebook and on Instagram get their pages back.
Yeah.
But yeah.
On a First Amendment?
No, I don't think there's no litigation. It's just sort of dealing with the internal processes.
Okay.
I got banned from...
When
I was trying to advertise my book, I got banned from advertising on Facebook and from advertising on Amazon, which is where the book is sold.
Right.
And yeah, when you get banned from these places, it's tough because it's not really it's sort of just like, this is our decision.
Right. It's my way or the highway. If you don't want to be on my platform, go away. That's the power they have.
You don't have a Fifth Amendment sort of takings clause with respect to your social media platform. But no, Brandon's had a lot of success with getting people their Facebook pages back. Cause I get it. I mean, for advertising purposes, I mean, that stuff's super valuable.
Yeah, look, you have to tell me, Charlie Alovisetti, we should probably say now, it's no longer two names, it's Brian Vicente.
It's just Vicente.
Just Vicente.
You've seen our new card. We have a new
brand. Yeah, no, it's Vicente.
With a period at the end.
I get you.
There was a lot of debate about the period.
Okay.
I was anti-period.
Oh, geez, okay.
I was overruled, so we've got the period at the end of our name.
Yeah.
On our cards, but people seem to like it.
Doesn't take away from the work that you guys in that law firm has done over the years. And now, of course, you've got the single name.
Yeah, and job's not done, right?
No. We're actually right in the middle of it again. And it's probably, even though the job has become harder for lobbyists now.
I should say I've also moved to the DC area. So now I've like trying to get more involved with the lobbying and political side of things.
Great.
It's so easy for me to come in, But there's still a lot of work to do.
Right. And that's why we're here for the NCIA. And that's why Aaron Smith and I host the Voice of Cannabis podcast together now.
Oh, nice.
And it's kind of a cool thing. And now I've got a national news show that I produce and a podcast that I co-host with Aaron. So I thank the NCIA and Aaron Smith on the record for that too. And it's always good to see you.
Likewise.
All right. We're going to have more of this special on location here in Washington, D.C. for Lobby Days with the NCIA after this.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Stevie Fazy with the Canadian Took of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Elena Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCMTV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Elena Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCMTV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.
Okay, Aaron, Lobby Days 2025, your 13th annual, is now history in the rearview mirror, as they say. What were your impressions of the last few days in Washington, D.C.?
As always, it was a great advocacy experience for us and for the members of Congress and their staff that participated, and most importantly, the members of NCIA. We took over 100 meetings across Capitol Hill to inform and educate lawmakers on issues like 280E, banking, and the need to end federal prohibition.
Right. And for the most part, can you tell before you go into the meeting, is this going to be a friendly meeting or a confrontational meeting?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, we have voting records for most of these members, and in some of them maybe we don't know because they're freshmen, but you would be surprised they're almost always friendly, even if their boss, because most of these meetings are with the staff. The staff often support cannabis reform because it's a generational issue and they're younger, typically, and even if their boss doesn't, so you'll always find. Be pleasantly surprised that it's quite a friendly environment and cordial.
And can you take the temperature of Capitol Hill right now? Is there a chance that the States Act has some legs at some point this year?
There's always a chance. It's the challenge right now is there are hundreds of competing issues, and in some ways the world seems like it's on fire, and cannabis reform is one of many other issues that aren't quite on the top of the priority list just yet. So but that's why we're there. That's why we have to keep pushing this thing forward, or we'll never get on top of the list.
If you look at the plant itself as a medicine, and you look at over the last, let's say, 20 years of reform, where people are starting to see the medicinal qualities that this plant has, whether it's the overwhelming anecdotal evidence or the science evidence that's out there. And I just wonder, it seems the most serious people that get diagnosed with the various diseases out there that we know it interacts with: epilepsy, seizure control, Graves' disease, Crohn's disease, cancer. It's a whole litany of diagnoses. And it always seems that the people that are doing it wait till it's the last resort treatment for a lot of them. And I wonder if that's the mentality of our elected officials, that because it's not a priority, so we're just going to make it the last resort and use it when we, being the elected officials, need to use it. Is that an accurate way of kind of looking at what's going on?
That's interesting. I've never heard it put that way. That's interesting, Jimmy. But yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, I think it's not just cannabis. I think there are a lot of issues like that.
Yep.
And they're it's politically advantageous, but it's also difficult. So it's easy, particularly frankly on the Democratic side, we've got a lot of members that'll say they support it, and they do, but when it comes down to actually getting policy reform done, it's hard. And so we haven't seen that sort of bold reform in Congress yet, but the institution itself is designed to impede quick legislative action, and that's and there's good things about that as well. I think it might keep us from falling into a fascist regime.
Right.
If so a sweeping populist movement can't come in and just completely get all the laws changed that quickly because of the safeguards in place. I mean, that's not since the New Deal probably have we had really bold changes that were significant. So I think this is part of the process, and the fact that we do have members of Congress, so many now, that are at least willing to give the issue lip service is still progress. But it's still up to us to hold their feet to the fire.
Well, I will tell you, I think I said this before. I think all of you lobbyists have a very difficult job. It gives me I have a lot more appreciation now for what you go through, how challenging this is to work inside the government structure. So I was enlightened, to say the least, about my experience at Lobby Days in 2025. I thank you very much for that. And of course, I look forward to future Voice of Cannabis podcasts for the NCIA with Aaron Smith and myself in the weeks to come.
As do I.